This episode of Captured Pittsburgh Darkroom has been made possible by generous contributions from Friendship, Perk, and Brew, Small Universe, and Captured Identity. Today we're featuring the song Snake by the Red Lines.
Where you from?
I'm from the streets of Mount Lebanon.
Hard.
The hard streets.
Pull up hard, my Dodge Neon.
Where I gained the hard money. selling my photos.
Yeah. Out of the trunk of my Ford Probe, yo.
Another dollar. All you do is bitch and holler. And every day it's more the same. I'm getting tired of playing the same old game.
Hey everybody, Adam Thomas here with Captured Pittsburgh Darkroom. Thanks again for joining us. Today we are coming to you relatively live from the Friendship, Perk, and Brew and Friendship neighborhood of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Yeah, I forget what city am I in? Oh yeah. Today we're joined by Jon Hall of Jon Hall Photography. Thanks a lot for coming in, Jon.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it, man.
It's a pleasure being here.
Awesome. So, first and foremost, before we dive into everything, because we've got a couple of really helpful goodies for people later on in the episode, we kind of want to learn a little bit about you to start off, and I'll talk a little bit about your work, and then later on in the show, we've got some neat surprises for whoever it sticks around for the second half. So,
Sure thing.
Hint. First and foremost, just so everybody's aware, like Jon and I actually kind of go back a ways. We both went to college together. I've known Jon for the better part of almost 2 decades now. So it's a real pleasure to have you here in this capacity instead of the usual.
Drinking coffee.
Yeah. Now
right.
we just traded mugs. That's all. It's no big deal, kids.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Totally on the level here.
Yes. So first and foremost, I know you're Pittsburgh native, but specifically, where are you from?
Actually,
so the folks at home know.
Pittsburgh native probably up until like high school years.
Right.
Prior to that, I was in the eastern part of the state. I was home to a Philadelphia area.
Oh.
And so
No,
sorry about that.
I'm kidding.
So I grew up there. Both my parents are from Pittsburgh, so I'm kind of like born from Pittsburgh, but I kind of moved like around whenever I was younger. I lived in, Philly, just all over that general,
Eastern PA,
like Delaware Valley area.
Yeah,
kind of thing there. Back in high school, I came back here, probably 7th grade or so, and then I kind of worked my way from there. I'm a graphic designer by nature, so I kind of do that kind of stuff. I work for the printing industry, so I'm more like a printer currently. That's my main job. Photography is kind of like a thing that I do on the side currently. It's more like a way to fill in the gaps of kind of like the dead times that I have pretty much. So,
and you also teach.
I also teach there. Yes.
Where can you let everybody know where you teach photography?
I teach at the South Campus at a CCAC, and I teach at the Art Institute of Pittsburgh too. And so teaching at those 2 places gives me the outlet to kind of like share my knowledge.
Right.
Coming back from college and everything, I was involved in pretty much like all the classes I could get like in. Basically, I was in photography, I was in 2D painting, I was in 3D stuff. Like I was doing it all, and that kind of like time where I can learn as much as I could kind of like followed me around until I could eventually teach.
Right.
And so I started teaching when I was 26, actually. I was pretty young.
Yeah.
Whenever I started teaching. I was probably a little bit too young because I didn't really take it too seriously until I kind of got into like my 30s, in which things began to be a little bit more of like a professional setting.
Right.
But
it's got to inform your work a good bit too, I'd imagine.
What's that?
It's got to inform your work a good bit. Like just that you not just like I've noticed the folks that have that graphic design background before they jump into photography, they have like this really amazing handle on composition. Maybe they have to learn some of the other stuff, but like they already have that part down. And like I really like seeing work that comes out of that.
Yeah.
Kind of a photographer. So like you get to be able to like pass that information on, and that feedback sort of, I would imagine, like I said, it has to inform what you're doing because you're getting all this other.
Right. Well, I have to stay stay up to what's happening too. You
Yeah.
know, so like all the research I do and like all the planning that I do as far as projects, I have to, you know, the hardest thing I had to learn was to understand the basics because like, but by the time that we're like intermediate going into like the advanced level, we forget how to do like the basics.
Right.
You know, it's like using Photoshop.
Right.
We know how to do things just because we're just motor sensory into it. So to try to explain it, to try to go back to like square zero, that's kind of like a hard thing to do. That's kind of what I learned about with my photography and everything was I had to learn the basics as far as like what exactly does the ISO do and how can you control that and where does the shutter speed come and like
and why
yeah, exactly.
The why.
It's not just doing this does that, it's why does it do that and how can you adjust it to make something better happen.
Right.
And so that's all part of the like that's kind of where like the teaching comes really into play is really it helps me identify what works as far as like an artist and as far as a person too.
Right.
You begin to kind of experience things that within your photography and you know within your graphic design that really it just kind of changes the way that you are, you know, and so you begin to kind of like understand why you're doing things and kind of where you're coming from.
I kind of get the feeling too that sometimes I know with my work, and I'm sure it's the same with almost everybody else, that you go through those like periods or like eras, and then like when you go back and look at like the more historic photographers of the past century, you have this appreciation for, oh, this was their black and white period, or this was their street period, or whatever. Right. And you know, it's not so much like a sense of boredom that compels you to move on. It's more of that learning process, the always learning process, and you discover this other thing, and it opens another door, and you're on to that next set of challenges. And you know, I think that's the most exciting part of it. Really.
Yeah, and you know, learning how they do things and everything. You know, like learning like the steps you have to take to get the right shot. Yeah. You know, like we were studying like the first flash, and like they had there was a photographer in the Depression era in which he would burst into people's doors and then flash them. Mm-hmm. You know, like flash
with a camera flash.
With folks. A camera flash. And so it was the first use of flash, and like because part of that, people would always stand in front of like a very long exposure, and so it was all the portrait shots. Yep. And that was the first time that like a on-camera flash mounted device was used, and people saw like the real world, and it totally changed like the whole landscape and everything. And so learning about that kind of stuff really gives you credence to what you can do now. Yeah. You know. Yeah.
So you had one. You've been featured in our gallery twice now? So
once.
No, once. It was the
Locks.
Yes. Yeah. So that was in our February gallery.
That one,
which was Love in the Berg was the theme. So can you tell everybody about how that particular photo came about that we ended up having in the gallery?
That one happened by happenstance, actually. I was on a field trip with my photography class, and we were at Phipps Conservatory, and we had a morning shoot for macro photography, with flowers and macro kind of go hand in hand. And after the shoot, I was walking down to a Shenley Bridge, and on the bridge, there's a bunch of locks there. And it just happened to be, it was the right time of day. It was like 10 o'clock in the morning still. The sun wasn't quite risen. It was like mid-March, so like it was still like the wintertime weather. And the sun was perfect, basically. And so I was able to get like a lot of the color and like a lot of the right mood that I wanted to get. Right. And so there's literally hundreds of locks. And there's these two locks that were like purple and purple, silver, and then orange. And just the combination of like those colors just worked out perfectly. Yeah. And that was the genesis of it. I took the photo as just like a passerby, not really putting much thought into it. And then as I looked at it more and more, and I was like, you know what? I really like this photo. Like this one has a lot of meaning to it and like a lot of feeling to it. Yeah. And like that's how things happen usually, is that you just take it not knowing what it means. And then when you go back to it, you're like, you know what? That's the one that kind of means something to me now.
Yeah, it's almost like the fact that it jumps out at you, whatever it is, a week or a month later when you go back and preview it. You're like,
exactly.
Well, if it's doing that to me, it'll probably have that effect, elsewhere. So yeah, that was it's for those of you outside the Pittsburgh area, there's they do it there, and then there's the one bridge downtown that they do that on too, right?
Yeah.
So they, kind of like the thing that happened after 9/11 with the padlocks that people put up in memory of different folks that passed away. So for those of you that, like I said, you're outside the Pittsburgh area, wonder know what he's talking about. Bridge of Shenley, and then it's not the Clement, it's the Warhol. I don't remember which bridge it is downtown now. Gosh, my mind's going blank.
I think it's. God, I don't even know.
It's either Clement or Warhol. It's one of them, isn't it?
I think it's the Warhol.
Okay, yeah, the same idea there. People will... Dave, you know which one it is, right? That's what you get for having staff. Anyway, anyhow, so that's what that is, and it just... There's a lot of people that take the pictures of those two bridges, especially when they get really filled up with padlocks, and a lot of times they feel forced. People are taking a picture because they feel compelled, because they think it's a landmark, or they think it's this sort of tourist trap thing. And yours just had this natural in the moment, like you said. It was a happenstance photo, and that's why I think that photo, like I'm the one that chose that one for the gallery that month, and it really grabbed me, because that was. It's weird. They call it Locks. It was Locks of Love or whatever it is, kind of named after that.
It's the bridge over in Paris,
right?
Yeah.
And it, love is a lot of cases, it's a fleeting thing in an emotional sense, not the commitment side of it, but your photo kind of felt that way, if you will, and I thought that was a good matchup. We're going to take a break here in a second, but very quickly, do you remember the photo that you took? And it doesn't matter if you were a kid or adult, whatever, the photo you took where you the light bulb went off and you're like, cool, this is something I want to keep doing. Like the thing that really grabbed you about photography?
Yeah, it was actually kind of later in my photography journey. I was downtown shooting some photos, and it was mid-January of 2016, I believe. And it was during the Women's March, and I was down there just shooting photos, just trying to document the whole thing and everything, and that was an experience that was fantastic and everything. But afterwards, the city had kind of emptied out, and it was very serene and very still. And I was walking down past the former Macy's building, and there was a trumpet player that was underneath the bridge or the tunnel, and there's an area in which it's really dark, and then only the yellow lights are on him and everything. And so he was just sitting there with his trumpet. His name was Glenn Sturgis. I remember him I just remember hearing that noise, and I was drawn to it, and I was just taking photos for him, and just you could feel the stillness of the city, this momentous event had just happened. Yeah. And no one to really listen to him. He was just doing it because he felt that it had to be done. And to be able to capture that moment in his life, and then kind of share that with other people, was just the most serene experience that I've ever had with a camera. And that's when I started to realize that it's fun to be technical about it, and it's fun to talk about all the lenses you have, this and that, but to really be able to kind of take that moment and then extend it beyond his life and my life too. That's something that really should be shared with the people, and that's something that really kind of stuck with me to this day.
That's awesome. That's a great explanation of it too, about how you share those moments and why that's important. That's honestly, that's one of the big reasons that we put the gallery in place outside in Shadyside, because there's this tendency when anybody hears the term gallery or exhibit or whatever, there's a hesitancy in a lot of people's minds because they have to enter a place. You know what I mean? There's a completely separate feel, and some people don't want to literally step across that threshold. This takes all that stuff, puts it outside of their own element in a space that's public, it's open. Yeah. You're not confined by walls, or it's just there. It doesn't matter if it's raining or sunny or snowy or whatever. It's there because getting people to be able to get in touch with that same extension that photographer went through to get that shot, regardless of the subject matter, there's something important there to me, and I think in judging by the reaction of a year and a half plus in that space, I think other people get it too. So I think that was, I know you've exhibited before, but I think that's got to be, I'm not trying to toot our horn here, guys, or anything, but it has to be a very, very different kind of a thing, a very unique exhibition experience for you compared to some of the other stuff you've done.
Definitely. To kind of build upon that, like prior to that, I was in Sweetwater Center. I was in Sweetwater Center for the Arts in Swiftly. One of my shots from the Women's March was there for a show called Turning Red, and it was about how like Pennsylvania had turned from a predominantly Democratic state to a red state, and that was a gallery experience. White walls, photography, people showing all their paintings and like this and that, and then like to kind of like juxtapose that to the Captured Pittsburgh Open Air Gallery. It was a very unique experience because everybody had come together to celebrate like the work of the masses, and it's a very communal experience.
Yeah.
The way that you set up your gallery, the way I see it, is like a metaphor for what you guys are, in which everyone's welcome and like everyone is really there. It's not just artists are submitting work. It's people that have other backgrounds. It's people that are psychiatrists or their parents, and they're a mother first, but they're like a photographer second, and so it gives people like that kind of like opportunity to show their passion for this kind of hobby,
and on an equal playing field too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's not elitism there. It's just an open community, open air gallery.
Yeah. As folks that have followed us from day one, we have 3 pillars. We basically built the organization on, which is promotion and support, but the two. And that's where a lot of that stuff from like our learning events and our well, actually more specifically the community events we do and the gallery. But that third pillar is education. And we're going to take a quick break here because when we come back, we're going to talk with Jon about that component of Captured Pittsburgh, the education component. He's going to be giving you some tips on natural light photography, specifically natural light portraiture. So when we come back, we'll be talking about that. First, we've got to pay some bills. We'll be back in a second.
This episode of Captured Pittsburgh Darkroom was filmed at Friendship, Perk, and Brew. They're your source for fresh coffee, Pittsburgh beer, and food made from scratch from locally sourced ingredients. You can find them at 300 South Pacific Avenue in Pittsburgh.
All right, thanks for coming back. I'm Adam Thomas here, Captured Pittsburgh Darkroom. Thanks for joining us for the second half of our talk here with Jon Hall, Jon Hall Photography. And in this segment, we're going to be touching on a subject that actually Jon helped us out with before. As we mentioned in the previous segments, Capture Pittsburgh was built on the idea of promoting and supporting local photographers and the communities that we all live and work in. But also there's an education component that's just as important. It's part of our 3 pillars of what we're made of and what our organization is about. So as a lot of you know, we do work with area schools on for photo education programs, as well as within the community to help educate both on the subject of photography and different aspects of the community, whether it's historic architecture or different aspects of culture, neighborhood to neighborhood here in Pittsburgh. But first and foremost, this is a photography organization, and so a lot of the education components we do outside of the classroom are meant for those in the general public that want to learn more about their camera, want to learn more about what they can do with it. And Jon was kind enough to help us out last summer, August of 2017. We had a natural light portraiture event. We held that at Highland Park. So it was a great place. It was like an automatic when we were trying to pick out a spot to host such an event. The light there is just spectacular almost year round. And especially that late summer period, it's literally gold. Jon came out and gave some of his tips, and then as with most of our Learn on Location events, we gave folks a chance to take what they learned right in that real world setting and work with diffusers and bouncers and so forth. So what Jon's going to go over here with you just for a little bit is touching on some of the things he talked about that day, so that those of you who either weren't able to make it last year that live here in the Pittsburgh area, or those of you watching maybe outside the Pittsburgh area, you get a chance to learn a little bit from one of the guys that helped us out that day. So Jon, what are some things that are important to keep in mind when you're trying to shoot outdoors and taking advantage of just simply what's available in natural light?
Just be aware where the light is constantly and knowing where the shadows are. That's the biggest thing that I can tell you. The the way in which you're shooting is going to be a big issue, or a big thing to kind of pay that much attention to. Is really to be able to know which angle the sun's coming at, and is your model going to be into the sun or is it going to be out of the sun? Right. So, like if the sun's behind the person, you want to expose to the person, not to the sunlight behind it, because you're going to have like pocket eyes, you're going to have a really dark nose, and it's just not going to look very, very good. And the post-production is going to be a nightmare. Yeah. Same thing as if like the sun's behind you and it's hitting the model. You want to definitely, look at what's the brightest part of it. Is like the clothing, are they wearing white? Is that going to be like a burnout? Right. You want to expose to what the lightest area it possibly will be. But you really want to shoot with like the sunlight to the side and just get like a nice dramatic close-off look. And if you can shoot by a wall or something that can kind of like bounce light back, right? So you have like the light on both sides, kind of
soften that shadow a little bit,
right?
And
yeah. That's a very, very good thing to be there with. If anything can be like a diffuser, like if you have one of those, that's great. Even like a bed sheet can be used there. Just like a white bed sheet, just kind of like disperse the sunlight, so you get like a nice clean look, so it's not like harsh shadows. Right. Harsh shadows, you get like that July picnic summertime look, and everyone has like no eyes and everything. Right. It looks very scary.
That slant, like that hard. The line.
Yeah. And then you're if you're good at like Lightroom or like Photoshop, you're dodging and burning until like
it looks fake at that point.
Basically, you just spend your summer inside editing photos. Right. You don't want to do that.
No.
So as much practical stuff as you can is the best way to go about doing it.
Would you recommend folks like whether they have an actual balance board or they just buy a piece of foam core or whatever?
Yeah. I mean, for a balance board, just a sheet of paper, like a piece of foam core is perfect.
Yeah.
There's companies that have them on sale for like $2 a pop, and they're like 18 by 24.
Yeah.
Perfectly amount there. You don't even need like a partner to hold it up. Just put it like against a tree or whatever.
Yep.
And that's like perfectly fine.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember before I started acquiring like all the diffuser gear and actual bounces, like the different types of bounces, like when I would do foam core, I would clamp it to like another tripod.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Or like sometimes if I needed the bounce to have some shape to it, like I would cut the back half of the foam core, just bend it a little, and just a little. I mean, there's tiny things like that. It doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg. I know that's why a lot of photographers start off doing that, just because either they don't understand the nature of different kinds of flash units and how you can apply them, but it's a cost saver.
It is.
You're not out there trying to buy a bazillion different lenses and flash combos and triggers and
yeah. I mean, photography doesn't come down to like the most expensive lens.
Right.
It comes down to how well you can use the light that you're given.
Right. Knowing the locations, you know what I mean? If you have, like, I don't know about you, but like I keep a list of that stuff. Like,
yeah.
That way, if somebody asks, well, I need something that has this quality, well, I have a list I can go back to, and I can say, well, the light here at this time of year and this time of day is usually what you're looking for. That way, if you know your gear and you know your location, you know how you're going to be able to play with that light a little bit better.
And parks are a great area to shoot in, just because if it's bright outside, if there's no clouds in the sky and there's no natural overcast look to it, you can always shoot under some trees, and they're the perfect way to kind of like diffuse the light.
Yeah.
And then you get some really good kind of like caustic effects. It's just fantastic, and you really can't mimic that, really.
No.
So
I did a like a fashion shoot not too long ago when there was still some snow on the ground. And we had used I should have probably like filmed this, because it was like exactly what you're talking about. Like, we were using some of the branches that were off camera to create like kind of like creative shadows on her face, almost like so that you were highlighting her eyes that weren't in shadow, but we'd have this like on purpose, like, okay, turn your head, all right, I got this cool shape going on here, that it ended up, when you saw it afterwards, it was like, oh, that was pretty interesting. Almost felt like a superhero or something.
Yeah. I was doing a shoot in Market Square recently, and we were using the reflections coming off of the PPG glass.
Oh, nice.
And those were creating like some really good kind of highlight angles that we can just kind of get on like the person's face and everything.
Yeah.
And so like that that was a really, really cool thing.
That's a good tip for people too. If you don't have access to like a rural area or a big city park or something, sometimes the buildings around where you live can provide something outdoors for you like that.
Yeah. There's this beautiful area that's in the Strip District, and it's an old garage, but there's like graffiti everywhere, and it's like a yellow wall with like graffiti. And this place burnt down years ago. I hope they never tear it down because it's the perfect photography place.
Right.
And they should, save it as like photo studio A.
Oh yeah. The light in the Strip District in general is just like magic. There's something about that spot.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, shooting in the morning or like the evening is like your best time. I don't actually schedule things for like the midday because unless it's a little bit like overcast, you're just going to fight against the weather.
Yep.
The sunlight's going to be too much to handle. So, people in the morning, they usually look better than what they do in the evening too. So, yeah.
Well, not true with me. I'm just saying. I was going to say it now. What very quickly before we wrap up here, do you have any suggestions as far as an outdoor, like a lens of choice that you would say for people that are kind of dipping their toe in this end of the pool?
For unnatural light stuff?
Do you stick with primes? Do you not have a
primes
preference either way?
Primes are the go-to. I use an 18x70. Just like a Nikkor, and just having that, like having that ability to kind of zoom back and forth works out well. But like primes are the best. Primes are the best way to go, pretty much. If you can do something that has like a very low aperture, to go down to like a 1.4 would be like wonderful. Like the lower the f-stop you have, the better it's going to turn out.
Right.
If you have to use like a zoom lens, 18x70 is pretty much the way to go. But primes is the best way to go.
Cool.
Anything over, I would say 18 f-stop is going to give you like some kind of weird stuff going on. But like with a natural light, you tend to want to keep like your depth of field as like narrow as possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Keep everything focused on the subject. No pun intended, of course, but
exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'd like everybody to be able to, those watching either home or on their phone or whatever, be able to check out some more of your work. Where is the best place to do that?
JonHallphotography.com.
Okay.
JonHall. There's another Jon Hall with JOHN. His work is as good, but he's not me.
Right.
He's perpetrating my likeness pretty much. So
make sure you guys are looking wherever that is, somewhere in this area here. JON.
JON, exactly.
JONHALL. And
I'm a Jonathan by trade. I'm not just pretentious. So
gotcha. Well, I wouldn't say it.
Right. So
that's such a pretentious thing to say. I'm not pretentious. So JonHallphotography.com, and then Instagram.
Yes, I'm at jonhall.photography.
Okay, cool.
And that's it. Those are the two best places.
Awesome. Yeah, we definitely make sure you check out this guy's stuff. His portraiture, especially like the stuff you've done around Market Square. I know that's one of your go-to spots, but it is for a reason. It's a beautiful place for photography, whether it's corporate shots, senior portraits, engagement sessions, any of that. You got such a variety of backgrounds and colors to work with down there, and the light quality is usually really good.
Yeah, and shooting in front of the fountain is always a great time to do because you have it's like a blurry white wall, and it's rare to find those.
Yeah.
And so if you're patient enough and there's not enough kids there, like go in the morning when the kids are not there, you're going to have a beautiful shot.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for being here, Jon. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for the tips there, too. I hope everybody found those useful, too. I think we'll probably get some good feedback on that.
Yeah.
So, and then in the meantime, make sure you guys are subscribing to the channel here. There's a little bell you can click so you're notified every time a new episode is up. And let us know how we're doing in the comments. We like hearing feedback. We've gotten some really great suggestions on guests lately. So please keep those coming in. And most importantly, share this, whether you're watching it on YouTube or if you're listening on Anchor or iTunes or wherever. Make sure, I think we're on Spreaker too. And that's going to keep growing, by the way. Whatever platform you're on, make sure you share this up with everybody that you know. That way we keep growing this thing and being able to do more and more with it. We want to be able to talk to as much of the creative community here in Pittsburgh as possible, because the more we all get connected, the more benefit there is to everybody involved, whether you're on this side of the camera or that side. But until next time, Jon, always a pleasure.
Adam, always.
Yeah, yes. Good times. And same with you folks. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you all next time. Take care.
Captured Pittsburgh Darkroom is produced by Jason Fait, Adam Thomas, and Jason Kodat. Produced with the valuable assistance of Jon Hall and Dave Perlowski. Captured Pittsburgh Darkroom is a Captured Cities production, copyright 2018.